Hi, this is Paul Palmer, and I'm back here with Natasha from Spiral Dynamics. And today we're going to be talking about how preferences to change can show risk tolerance in people. Often when people hear about change, they go into fight or flight mode. I was wondering, Natasha, if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the brain research seems to show that when people hear, if your wife says to you, we have to change things around here, right? What's that first reaction? It's like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Life is coming to an end right now. So people have that reaction when it comes to change. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what it's going to be like. They don't know what it means for them. They don't know. We're used to being in a certain context with particular rules, and then everything changes. And so they're panicking.
So we're in quite an interesting situation at the moment in the UK with the Brexit change coming. And I can see so many people panicking, and it's coming out in the media. And it's coming out in the day-to-day conversations, and it's coming out in the social media messaging. But really, from a commercial perspective, the tolerance for change is in companies can cause so many problems when companies try to update, when they try to buy another company, when they merge, acquisitions, a whole range of different times when changes have to happen. Even when you've had a inspection from the local authority, you've got to make changes, but people resist it. How can you actually make it better for people to actually get involved in the change, commit to it? And in fact, actually, how would you know whether they're going to resist in the first place and what their risk tolerance is?
Well, we have tools that we use to measure resilience, to measure where people are going to put on the brakes, where they're going to resist, how stressed they are about the changes, how they prefer change to be. I like to use a little metaphor of if you're feeding someone and they happen to be a football player, you're going to feed change with a different size spoon and different food than you would if it's a toddler.
Yeah.
Right? So your toddler spoon's going to be teeny tiny with the little bites. Your football player spoon's going to be really big with really big bites and different food. So you've got to figure out the tolerance for the change. And, is it big bites? Is it small bites? How do you eat the elephant one bite at a time?
I quite like that metaphor because I do find that a lot of people that I work with sometimes, well, I'll take myself for an example. I can cope with a massive amount of change and step changes. But I know a lot of people that I've worked closely with, they really struggle even to do the smallest step, and they need to know the 20 or 30 different steps that they're going to get to in the same update, the same measurement, the same amendment to the process, for example, that I would
Yeah.
do one step.
See, you're talking about two very different ways of approaching change, of approaching risk, of having risk tolerance, which is, do I want it one teeny tiny bite at a time, all laid out orderly, or can I kind of go with the flow, pivot easily? Do I have more resilience? And you've really beautifully illustrated there these two different poles of that.
Ah, I see. So it's exactly what we're talking about measuring.
Yes.
So from inequality environment, I find that much of the time that the people that are in the routine operations, in the routine functions, don't want to change at all. And if you want them to amend the way that they do things, then they have to have a lot of support. So they're the ones with the low risk tolerance. Is that right?
Much lower, and the habit is so ingrained. Think of, a trickle of water that eventually carves its way into a river. You can move the trickle, but once it's carved its way into the river, moving the river is a lot harder. And that's what we do with habit. So the habits worked for a certain amount of time. Now we've got to move the river. A lot tougher once it's really ingrained.
So that's why it's really hard once a business or a management system, a process has been operating the same way for 5 years, then it's really hard to update your systems to improve efficiency. It's really difficult to get the step change that many people look for
Yeah.
because
Yeah, because the system itself attracted the kind of person who's going to do it in these teeny tiny steps and who's able to work that way.
yeah.
And the system itself repelled those who have this higher resilience because they like things to be different. So it's a self-reinforcing system that you're trying to adjust.
I just thought of an example based on a project that I did just recently. And then we were moving from a paper-based system to an electronic system, an electronic quality management system. And when we made the change, what we found was the people that were involved in running the systems routinely, so they were what we call the subject matter experts. They were actually designing the electronic system to work exactly the same way as the paper-based system, with the same number of transactions and no automation whatsoever from the electronic system. So they were actually doing it in such a way where they get no benefit from switching from paper to electronic.
Yeah, they're replicating their own thinking that was getting in the way of the purpose of the electronic system.
Yeah. So their tolerance to risk was really low. No, their risk tolerance or their
Well,
preference to change.
yeah, and there's a bias that keeps us doing things in the exact same way based on the function. So they weren't seeing the automation for what it could potentially do. They were seeing the automation to replace exactly the function that they were told they needed to do.
Rather than understanding the benefit of making the change in the first place.
Yeah.
I think I like that. I like the way that. So how does that relate back to the fight or flight mode?
Well, if you're thinking about having to make something that's a dramatic change to the way you're normally used to doing it, you're thinking, oh my gosh, am I up to it? Can I do this? Will I get fired because now I can't do this? Is my life going to be dramatically different? And you're like, no, this is just a simple automation. We're trying to make this easier so we can free up the hands to do the things that the hands need to do. But people aren't thinking about that initially. And usually it's the ones who are excited about the change, who plan the change, who want the change to happen, who impose it on those who never had a say in it.
So they're fighting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Understand it.
That's really interesting, Natasha. Thank you for another interesting session. So that's thank you everybody for listening. This is Paul Palmer and Natasha Todorovic-Cowan from Spiral Dynamics. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you, Paul.